demonstration of a ditch. So this is actually a water diversion that is on about a 3 to 5% slope, and it directs the majority of the water off of this driveway that runs up the hill that direction. And as we walk up, we'll maybe do a small exercise to calculate the amount of water that we're actually diverting into this water area here. So all of this water works its way down the driveway through this diversion ditch underneath our beautiful pile of cedar cutoffs, and it goes through this swale that kind of circles around to the back of the greenhouse. So we're taking all of the water off of the driveway, slowing it down, spreading it out on this like 80 to 90 feet, and slowly sinking it into this ground. And actually below it we've planted a small orchard, so we have some fruit trees that are going down here. So we're effectively helping to increase the waterlands here and also irrigate the orchard below it.
And this is a swale versus a ditch because it is full of wood?
Well, the wood is kind of something that we'll do in certain parts of swales where we'll add wood to it. It helps disperse the water, and then also it's something that can harvest. We're able to harvest the wood once it starts to break down. So after a year or two, all the wood will break down, and we'll actually shovel it out and harvest it.
Use it for compost.
Yep, use it in compost.
But in the meantime, it's slowing down the drainage process so it stays more here.
Yeah, the difference is it's level so that the water is moving along it. The ditch, or that it's staying and sinking. The ditch, you want to try to move the water so it's on angle.
So this is not trying to move it; it's just trying to hold
keep it there. Yeah.
This is like a dam basically. So this ditch is actually a swale, and it's on level contour. And so once the water reaches it, it just levels out and slowly fills up until it reaches the top. We haven't had it spill over yet, but hopefully in a few years we will, because over time, that's the idea with doing waterworks and earthworks like this, is as you get your rainfall throughout the years, the waterlands expands, reaches the water table like Eric was talking about, and eventually saturates and then starts to move down beyond that point.
Are you doing anything berm, planting? Or?
Yeah, so in here we have a mostly native seed planted all in this. You can see there's tons of yarrow coming up, all the lilies are coming up. So this is all a native planting. What's that?
You put the seeds in?
We planted some of these seeds, but a lot of it is just re-emerging. So we planted lupin. We actually planted some other things. We did chamomile and dill and a few other things, but those are yet to come up. But a lot of this is just emerging natives. And that was one of the other things that Eric discussed, is that we're really blessed on this piece of property because it's already restoring itself. There's the native life here is just incredible. In certain spots, in other areas that we'll see up top, it's not the case.
What about the bears and lions? I used to have a lot of bears and lions. I don't know what we're going to have now.
Well, we haven't seen bears up here yet, and we haven't seen mountain lions yet, but
You
I
mean
know that they're down by the lake.
because there's no cover for them?
Maybe so. And maybe there's not a lot of game for them either. Because I know
There's no cover for the game either.
Yeah. Eventually we'll start seeing more deer. We haven't seen a lot of deer up here either. They do come and they like to eat our gardens, so we do get deer up here, but not in the numbers that used to be present when we first did.
Yeah.
So
they're hiding out elsewhere. All of them.
yeah. They're not here at the moment.
But the little ones, the little animals. Do we still have them running around?
We have a lot of fox. Saw fox last night. Yeah. All right, you guys. So we're gonna go ahead and walk up the driveway. So as you can see, all of this is kind of on slope, and so this is all water also that's getting collected down into that earthwork system below. So in this area, you can see that we have a really steep slope that is definitely more than a 5% grade, and so we had a lot of movement of water here. And when we first got here in May of 2019, we had a huge amount of rainfall that rainy season. We had like 80 inches. It was double the amount that we normally get. And most of this water would just wash down out the driveway and wash out the road down below. And it would cause a huge muddy bog at the bottom. So one of the first projects we did was create a sloped water bar to help divert the water off of this driveway and bring it back onto this part of the property and ultimately get it into that basin to help hydrate the
Talking about
meadow.
this right here.
This was done afterwards because we had some major storms that came in where it dropped like 1 inch in an hour, and this would actually overflow. So we did a second one to catch any of the runoff from major rain events.
Oh, you're talking about this one.
This is where it starts. So when we get a big flow of water, this will fill up, and it's on like a 3% slope. So it does move the water, but imagine you just get a major downpour. This fills up and it can't drain it quick enough, so it actually overflows, and that's why we built the second one. But later on in the tour, we'll show you a solve that we're going to be replacing this with. That will solve into just one water bar, so we don't have to have this with a redundant system. But I'll show you that towards the end. So from this point, this is kind of a fun activity just to calculate the amount of water that we're collecting. And most people's pace is about 3 feet. So I'm just going to pace up to the top of the hill as we walk. And we know that we're like 1, 2, 3, 4-ish. So we're about 12 feet wide or so. And if we walk up to the top here, we'll show you a couple other waterworks systems that we've been working on, and then we'll kind of get a calculation for how much water we're collecting and diverting back into that swale system. So I'm going to count, or if someone else wants to count.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Well, as we're going up, you can see some of the landscape features. Where I was talking about wood swales, see how this material is starting to fit lines? So it's settling naturally and holding this water in these places.
I paced off 87, so 87 times 3, I'm not going to do it in my head. So 261 feet up to this point. Granted, I counted 12 feet wide on the road, and we have a lot more area here, but just to make it simple, we're just going to calculate 12 by 261. So we have 3,132 square feet of surface area. And for every inch,
right there, even more up there.
yeah, for every 12,500 square feet, or excuse me, for every inch of water on a 2,000 square foot surface, you will collect 1,250 gallons of water. So we are at 3132. Gosh, how do I calculate this really quickly in my head? 50. So at 3,132 square feet, we are collecting around 1,600 gallons of water for every inch. So 1,600 gallons, and Concow's average is 40 inches. So in this area right here, on average, every year we can collect 64,000 gallons of water that used to run out onto the driveway, out onto the road, wash out the road, cause problems for all the neighbors, but now it's being redirected back into this basin and this landscape. And that's just with a normal rain year, and that's also just collecting what's on the road. It's not collecting all, or not factoring in all of the passive water that we'll be collecting from all of the slope that ultimately reaches its way to the waterways as well. So,
So can you repeat that? It was just square area. What's the formula?
So the formula is square feet. So for every 2,000 square feet, and every inch of rain, it equals 1,205 or 1,250 gallons of water. So it's kind of
2,000 square feet is 1,250 gallons.
Breaks down to like per 1 square foot an inch of rain is like 60 gallons of water or something like that. 62 gallons of water.
You could probably do that calculation. I don't know if you want to do it, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, so and this can be applied in lots of different areas depending on what folks' circumstances are with their properties. If they have a house and they just have a yard, they can calculate the square footage of their roof, collect all of their rainwater from their gutters, or even their driveway, reroute out the water from the driveway. Just calculate that, the square footage of the area that you're collecting water and rediverting it, and it just gives you a good idea of how much water you're actually sequestering.
What about the size of the ditch? Like, what about the depth of the, or like width of the actual channel? Does that affect how much water you're capturing?
Well, as long as it's large enough to capture the water where it doesn't overflow, and you're actually able to direct
then
it.
it's just funneling
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so this calculation that we did was mainly just calculating the area of rainfall that we're receiving and where we're channeling it to. And then the swale or the ditch, it needs to be built in a way to accommodate 64,000 gallons from this area. And so far, we've been okay with it.
Really, it's not like mostly spilling over?
No, actually, we have very little spillover. If we weren't lucky enough to have it be raining on this event, or else we all could have witnessed that.
Wish it was raining.
How do you figure your swale?
They vary. This swale over here is quite small. It's about maybe 10 inches deep to 12 inches deep, and it's a little bit more narrow. The swale that we're going to be working with today and digging today is a similar depth, but it's going to be quite wider. It's almost 3 feet wide.
And that's going to be lower elevation. Right?
Yeah, and we'll show you where it's at. It's going to be coming up on the tour.
So just to talk about the calculation, it's measured for non-permeable surfaces, so like rooftops and pavement. Even dirt roads are semi-permeable. A lot of it just flows right off. So you can get a good approximation with compacted soils and dirt roads. You can use it as an approximate compared to like a rooftop or something.
Right. Yeah, this calculation wouldn't necessarily work like on this area over here that's filled full of herbaceous material, and it's not going to flow the same way because there's going to be a lot of infiltration in those areas. We will see runoff, but you can't calculate the same way as a compacted gravel road, a paved driveway, or rooftop. Yeah.
I just set up some cisterns to capture water off some metal roofing, and that's like the barn and extra buildings. But the house, we were told, you don't capture the water off your like composite shingles, because especially if you're going to try to use it for animals or something. And you know about that?
Well, I mean, I guess that I would just go with what my intuition tells me, and that if you're collecting it for drinking water or for watering animals, then I probably wouldn't mess with the composite roof. But if it's going through a system of plants to help filter it out and putting it back into the environment, I would feel okay, because it happens anyhow. Either it makes its way to the sewer and down to the river, to the estuary, to the ocean, or you're going to put it back into your land. So I think that if you have a healthy plant system set up, it can help clean some of that out, but maybe not for drinking.
Something to say about that. I have a friend who was part of the landscaping team for Sierra Nevada, and they opted to not collect rainwater for growing their vegetable garden because it wouldn't be able to be certified organic. So maybe something about actually eating the.
And do you know what kind of roof they had?
Metal, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah, there's tar.
Their material, so
Yes.
that's always going to be eroding and getting into the water itself.
Yeah.
So a metal roof is another thing, and you can actually, put that into your ecosystem with composite.
Yeah, that was my instinct.
It needs to be filtered or somehow cleaned before you use it.
Which it could be, pretty, not pretty.
Cool. Any other questions? So just a little quick history, just to give people some kind of perspective about this land and how the project began. I came here in May of 2019 with a couple friends that I met at the PDC in Occidental, at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. And we actually set up our camp right here on the other side of this container. And we had 3 vehicles pulled up, and we had a major crazy spring storm that came in where it dumped like 4 inches in a storm in a day. And so we really got a good sense of how the water flows and how dramatic it can be. This area down there, where our dwellings are set up now, looks just like all of this stuff. It was really thick and dense, and over time we ended up migrating down there and moving away from the container because it was not hospitable up here, and started to work on collecting this water because it was really evident right off the bat of how dramatic the water events can be here. So that being said, we're gonna, oh actually, we can talk about a couple other things here. You guys might notice some of these earth bags here. So this is a project that Matthew Trum came out and helped with. The summer of 2019, we had really strong rains that came in July, and we got maybe 2 or 3 inches of rain in July. And this whole area had been cleared, and we just had major runoff. It was running down here, it was circling back, which I'll show you when we walk around the corner, and actually running down and eroding the gully down through the middle of the meadow. And so we did some temporary mitigation by putting earth bags on contour to help slow down all of this flow. So there's a little series of them here. They're all starting to degrade. But what's cool is that we have put water systems in play that have made this moot. So this system isn't useful any longer, so it's going to get cleaned up eventually. But it really served a purpose for a year. It helped us out because we were having so much erosion. So if you walk down this way, you can see the water was flowing down this slope. And we ended up digging a sediment trap here because we had a huge amounts of sediment running into the road. This area here captures a ton of sediment that comes down. I'm glad that no one parked in it. Yeah. And then we have another one here. This one gets a little more traffic, so we have this one covered. And again, these bags were on contour, and it helped divert all this water coming down, and it redirected it down, which we actually already had this swale system set up below. So it redirected everything. Instead of coming down this direction where it was, it redirects the majority of it back down into our system that we already have set up to collect all that water. But what was happening, that's all happened after.
Oh.
And then any extra runoff that makes that corner would come down this way. And this is the area that we were having problems with erosion. This whole road right here used to be bare soil, and it was starting to gully out. And since we put these in place, and then we actually ended up, Eric and I last spring, or last winter, dug this swale network, and it runs all the way down to that corner. We haven't connected it here because we have this gully, and then it runs all the way down around those corners beyond those trees right there. And so now what's happening is the system that we put in previously, it's not doing the job that it was first intended to do because we have this system that catches all of that water now.
And is this a contour?
This is on contour. This is totally level. Like so when we get about 1/3 of an inch of rain within an hour, hour and a half, this will almost fill. So when we get really strong rainstorms, these fill really quickly, and they're just like little reservoirs here full of water.
You put straws off there, it looks like?
We did, but we also have like 60-mile-an-hour winds up here, and it has its way with it. So these swales are slowly starting to vegetate. A lot of the natives are finally starting to emerge through, so I'm curious to see what's going to happen this year because it's now been, this is the second year that we've been collecting water in this system. And each year you get to see that evolution and watch the plant systems really proliferate. This side really did well. This is definitely more of a dry section. You can look on this swale, there's a lot more vegetation starting to grow along this swale.
And if we eventually connect these,
Do you curve them around like, you know, like feng shui, or they just because of the tree roots, or like?
Well, it sure does look feng shui, but we're gonna get into actually a lot of detail on that towards the end of the tour, and when we start the work, we're actually going to show you how these how we design the contour line. And we have a laser level here, courtesy of Campfire Restoration Projects.
It's a part of the tool lending library.
Yeah, so we're going to show folks how to use the laser level, so that way if you need to check it out and start to do work on your land and get all of us out to your land to do projects, then you already know how to use that laser level. All right, so now if we head back this direction, you'll notice that we're starting to go, oh actually, we do have one other small waterworks here. So this is an area, remember I was talking about when you have major rain events, you can have, it's good to have redundant systems, because if this system were to overflow and your swale ends up breaching, then it could blow out, basically it's like blowing out a dam, then it keeps all your water capacity from holding and it just runs off. So we have one redundant system right here. And this is a little small swale network. We have wood in it, so it's easier to walk in, but what happens is the water infiltrates here, it circles out. Once it fills up, it spills in this area down to this swale, and this fills up, and once it fills to a level, it spills and then goes down and reaches that swale. If we get a huge rain event and it starts to get overloaded, what will happen is it'll overflow into this basin right here. So we have another sediment basin, another overflow patch, just in case of a major rain event. Yeah.
I just wanted to point out, you can see right here that we've been doing is putting the wood in the depression. So these were made of swales, but there's also all the burned out stumps. And they make their holes and they fill with water. And people have the question of, well, I've got all this dry, dead wood. I don't know what to do with it. If it catch fire, what do I do with it? You can bury it where you know water concentrates. It'll rot in place. It'll help produce organic matter for all the plant and fungal communities.
And look at that.
As you can see, that won't burn.
No, and it's loaded with mycelium.
So it's a good way to get rid of all that dry, dense brush if you've got holes in the ground like that.
Instead of chipping it, just lay it in there.
Yeah, you can chip it.
Chipping it would be
Actually, wouldn't you be better using burlap?
This is just what we had available at the moment. These were donated by the wonderful African, but they are not UV resistant. At least not for more than a year. Yeah. But that's why I say this. It was a temporary mitigation. We had an issue that we needed to quickly, and we didn't have time to do this swale system, so we opted to get these earth bags. And they were inexpensive and quick, and we had awesome people to help us with it.
What about just a mill?
And we use mill-ins too. Yeah. Mill-ins work really well for it too. Especially for driving over. You can see the mill-ins have really held up to being driven over, but the earth bags not so much.
Yeah, we weren't supposed to, but we had to get to the well.
Alright. So now we're going to start to make our way up to one of the highest points on the property. I think we should forgo talking about this area here. So this is another area that we could have calculated. We could walk out and calculate, because we're also catching all of the water from the surface area of this road and directing it to that swale as well. There's Willie.
Hi, Willie.
You want to take over and talk about this part, Eric?
So now I want to revise some of the presentation and show some of the landscape effects. And we're going to talk about erosion. So this road here, it started channeling water between the tire ruts. And as we walk down, you can see it's starting to erode. It's called channeling. It creates these channels, and left unchecked, it's going to ruin this road. Now there's ways. Let's just say this is not a road, and you've got this channel here. There's ways you can basically take, brush and stone and what have you, and make these little dams that don't fully go over the top, because if they go over the top, then that flow will go on the side. But the point is to slow, so the erosive effects are reduced, and it will also collect sediments and silts that you could actually harvest for like potting mix or distribute in your garden. And if you make it with organic materials, it'll break down over time. So this is one way of doing a quick fix to reduce those erosive effects. On a road, we basically have to regrade this so that the slope is rolling that water off on the side, and then we may design a diversion along the side of it like a ditch. So that's one of the erosive effects. We'll keep going down this direction, you'll see more. As we're walking down, you can see how there's a lot of brush here that's burned really hot, and you can look on the ground, and we tend to see more plant communities as we get lower elevation. That's the product of all the water that's being collected as we go lower.
So I don't know if anyone paced this road and did a calculation. Anybody? No. That's okay. We know it's a lot of water. It's probably at least over 50,000 gallons. But we have a temporary ditch here that mitigates this water down to the collection basin, and then it hits the culvert and works its way down. In retrospect, after this has been a temporary thing for 2 years. We're anticipating getting so much flow off of the road, which we're about to show you after this, that we're afraid of overloading this basin. So we're going to bring the diversion back to this way and have it on the opposite side, so we don't overload this basin and have it peak over the road, because that's not going to be ideal if that happens. So we're going to kind of forego this, and we'll come back and talk about this in a moment.
So here's another landscape feature. This was all cut out from the fire excavated. There's this nice flat area. So we've got runoff coming down from the hillside and collecting here. Now when you observe your soils, you can see different flows of movement with the water. You can still see a puddle right here. This is the basin that collects. All the lighter textured soils, the clay and the silt, will concentrate in the basin. So as those concentrate, it actually increases how much water can hold and not infiltrate. So you get more and more clay. You're basically building a pond at that point. We're not quite sure we want to make a pond here. We may. maybe a vernal pool. But you could also see some features here. You see all this sand? So that was all the sediments and silt were leached out, and you can see where higher flows are by that sand rig, how much sand you can see. And then you see the plant communities slowing it down as debris and material.
Oh yeah, the sand gets stuck in the grass.
Right. As debris and material gets stuck here, that gives it a nice little layer to maintain moisture, and those plants are doing the work to correct all this erosion and damages. So yeah, come out, you can see the clay over here, you can see the sands as they wash out. And I think we'll turn to... You want to talk about this section or go up top?
Well, I mean, we could just discuss that this area here, this is probably a common scene that a lot of people have, which is a area that used to have a structure that Cal OES came in and took 3 feet of soil away and made a huge depression. And so we have 1, 2, 3 of these areas. One of the practices
Where's the depression?
This area here, this used to be like almost level with the road.
Oh wow.
This area down here
Around the house, maybe.
used to be about this high.
Wow. So
And
there
there were
must have been.
structures here, and when Cal OES came in, they excavated and took it
You can
out.
make a
So,
marshland. Now you got a hole.
well, that's what we're looking at. And so, one of the things with permaculture is it's a lot of times it's good to take as much time as possible to observe and watch patterns and
And see what the nature's doing.
see what's
'cause
happening,
It knows what it's doing.
see
It's
what kind of
Mother Earth.
rain flow there is. And so this is still in evolution as far as the design plan. We have a lot of ideas. We're most likely thinking of some ponds, but definitely restoring this area, because I'm not sure that we're going to be putting any kind of structures back in this area. So we'll probably focus on a restoration plan. But in the meantime, we're working on getting this main artery going through the middle of the property to help hydrate the property for the
What
benefit
about
of
raised
plants.
beds? With a nice level area, you can make raised beds.
Sounds nice. You want to come here and tend them?
The deer would
We need
love
someone.
them.
We need someone to have a camp here so they could tend them and have it be in their zone 1. Yeah. So we're gonna walk up this way here, and we can kind of start the process of showing you our main swale that we're going to be working on today. It's just a drizzle.
This is what we're after, water.
Yep.
There it is. Blessing us.
Okay. Let everyone get up here. So just because we're kind of running a little bit long, I'm not going to walk everyone up to the top of the road so we can demonstrate how much water we're going to collect. We've already measured it. And from this stretch of road, just to that gate, you may be able to see up there, which the road actually extends well beyond that. Just from that gate down to here, in 1 inch, we will collect 108,000 gallons of water. Or, excuse me, in 1 year. 1 year. In 1 year of average rainfall in Concow, we collect 108,000 gallons of water. And so this is another kind of upgraded idea of a water bar, which I showed you right at the beginning of the driveway. We have the 2 redundant systems. This one is not going to need redundancy because we did a really thorough job. This one was dug down quite deep, and then we used these granite rocks to fill it in. So when it rains, the water channels generally in a couple channels where the tire ruts are, and this thing fills up. And this ditch here is on feet to 5% slope, and it works its way all the way around that way. We can kind of walk that line. We have to go back around the fence.
This is a ditch, not a swale, right?
Right.
It sure looks like it's going uphill, but it's going downhill. You can turn the hose on. That's one of the things, like, wait till you see the swale that we're about to dig. You're going to say, you're crazy. That's really cool. But, yeah, it's kind of like that. All this water used to run down this road and walk down to the very bottom. And then it would ultimately go down this little ravine, but it would really quickly get into the watershed and work its way down the hill. And so we're just taking that water and spreading it out and saving the road for our neighbors, which we don't ever drive on that road, but the neighbors go past it. And then just bringing this water out and spreading it to a degree that's going to eventually make its way back down to the same watershed that it was, but it's going to be carrying a lot less silt and debris, and it's going to help the fish and everything downstream. It's going to make Concow Lake look cleaner.
Oh, yeah.
So, so now you can see, if you come, Margarita, and look at this side, does it look like it's uphill here now?
Oh, yeah, it does look like it's going downhill, huh? Wow, that's something else, ain't it?
Yep, so this area we just dug out last week, and we've already had a couple rainstorms, and this whole system has gotten charged. It flows the water really well, aside from the gophers that like to make little sinkholes in it. So it kind of requires a little bit of maintenance during the rain. During the rains, I'll come out and monitor it, or Eric and Robin and I will. And if we notice any spots where the gophers have decided to make a hole in it, we'll just stomp it down, and then the water runs right over the top. But they do require some maintenance, because you need to make sure that you're not having breaches, and just making sure that the water's flowing how you anticipate it to. And if you need to make changes, as long as you're doing observations and getting in there, you can make those changes. So just get good rain gear. So this system comes all the way down here. Oh, here's a great example. So here's where all of our rainwater went last night. No gopher hole.
Oh, yeah.
So we're gonna have to get in here and do some mitigation for this, but
Yeah, so we can't.
eventually they will give up, I promise.
Well, what we learned is we can't tame nature, but at the same time, they're making their own waterworks. The gophers are transferring that water and distributing it. Maybe not exactly how we want it, but it's going around. So at the very least, they're helping in that respect.
Right.
Don't the gophers worried about getting flooded down there?
They got it figured out. They've got little escape
routes?
They even have little areas where they purposely let the drainage flood down.
To keep other things out.
Yeah.
Bugs,
Yeah.
other animals.
Prairie gophers.
Yeah, there's yeah.
Sometimes rats move into other animals.
Be careful in there for holes and sticks and wires.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like mold tells us the quickest way to get somewhere.
Oh yeah. Love the mullein. Love the mullein, yep. Yeah, we're gonna be planting it near transplanting some near our compost building. They're better green to wipe with.
Yeah.
When they're dry, they leave fuzz.
Thanks.
Okay, so this waterway works its way around, and just to not to compact soil, so you can step in it and over it. But I try not to step on the swale itself.
Cool.
So if you're doing them at home, I wouldn't do it either. Careful for depressions here. So, I'll wait for the view. So part of observing the land is looking at the natural contours and the natural topography in your space. And when we were making the diversion, we had several choices of where we would divert the water down to the culvert. And we chose to keep it on a shorter slope so the water didn't move quite as quickly. But then if you look at this area here, there's an inflection point where these two ridges meet and there's a waterway that comes down here. So this is kind of a vernal stream that happens in the spring when there's really heavy runoff. And so we just decided to tie it into that system because it's already present. And that'll work its way all the way down to that culvert, which is down at the bottom. So we can continue down that way and we'll show you where we're going to be working.
I forgot to tell everybody else to turn their Wi-Fi off, so your bandwidth is great too.
I think it's fine.
on power saver mode. That probably helps. The internet guy told me there's more people on using it at the same time. The harder it is to stream.
Same with electricity. You can charge your phone quicker.
So you can see where the culvert passes through. It's also on a slope. So it's probably on like a 3 to 5% slope as well. And it runs down this direction. And if you look down this way, we have more slope that we had to account for. And so we continue running the ditch down before we reach a point where we find a level contour. And to not get too technical, it is called a checkpoint or a point of actual level, and you can see that once we reach the bottom here. So we kept this ditch going down on a 3 to 5% slope, and so it just evacuates all that water and moves it quickly, fairly quickly, all the way down to this point. And so this point right here is where the slope of the ditch levels out and it reaches our contour, and this is the beginning of our swale. And we have the swale mapped out. It covers almost 1,200 feet and it wraps around this entire basin and works its way back to the other end of the property. We're not going to be digging all that today.
Unless we really get out.
You might. Yeah.
There's a lot of us here though. But
You might do it.
But to give you perspective, like this section here, we actually had some obstructions involved. We had these big stumps. That's a small one, but we had some massive stumps that we had to dig out because there was dead oak trees that we ended up excavating out. But had that not been here, this probably would have taken us maybe 2 hours, and there was 4 of us. So we're blessed with easy digging in the soil for the most part. So not everybody's land is going to be as friendly. It may take longer. But I'm really a big fan of using hand tools and digging by hand instead of getting equipment in here. That's an alternative. We could rent equipment. We don't own any. But the ecosystem that's already starting to reestablish with all the plant life that's already reemerging, we feel would be compromised if we had equipment in here tearing all that up. And so instead, when we get in here with hand tools, we can save certain things and just be more delicate in the landscape. So this is the area that we've already dug. And if you look down this direction, we have a bunch of orange flags set up.
Let's get this
We dug around them and we used sawzalls and just cut them out. Yeah. We actually had a big grader around them and dug them out and then filled it back in so you don't quite notice where we dug them out.
I mean, I didn't know
Look at
where
that
they
one.
were. Yeah, and it's happened.
Shout out to Michael who showed us the stump.
Yeah, shout out to Michael who helped us with this stuff. We couldn't have done it without him.
Really?
But I think that stuff was really big giant ones. We had two big ones right there.
Huge hole and just filled it in.
I would not want to do that again.
Yeah, so we've been debating about that. That looks like a eucalyptus cyderoxylon to me, but it looks immature because the leaves are quite fat. Normally they're longer, but I'm not 100% certain. There is one above the well up there. That's why I thought it may be a seed that started.
So I want to make a comment on digging out trees and stumps. You don't really have to do it. You can design swales to be connected into smaller swales and work up and down a bit. And what that's kind of called is fish scale swales, or somebody made up that name. And so you could have a series of swales going in between trees. So there's a lot of techniques you can use. You use machinery, you can use hand tools, but your needs and means, just work with those and it'll work out. A lot of this work is just to get it there fast as possible. But eventually nature will figure it out too. Eventually just even leaving brush and making sure it breaks down will create its own swale system.
And if you work in the rain, it'll show you where to go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's one of the advantages that we have here because we have water up at the top, so we'll be running a hose down the culvert and letting this fill up. So the crew who's digging is going to be able to let the water show their level, which is really nice.
So why are you doing 6% grade rather than level?
Well, we had to move the water to here.
That was only back there.
So we left. So those ditches are on a grade in order to relocate the water to this level point. So this one is not on grade. This is completely level all the way around.
And it starts right at that corner right there, where it stops being on grade and starts being level.
But if you,
They're asking you to
I
speak
guess
up.
you would have to dig more of these if you had it all level.
Right. Well, and then we had the obstruction of the road. Or I mean, if we got the laser level out and followed this level line out, we would end up somewhere kind of off the edge underneath the culvert. And so we were utilizing the culvert because it's already a hardscape that's set that we can utilize to bring the water under the road instead of having to completely redesign the road. So that would have been that could be an alternative if you're starting from scratch. You can choose your level lines anywhere you want, but if you're dealing with existing infrastructure, sometimes you have to make adjustments to get around it.
I just wanted to hear your
Yeah.
Your logic and where you did the grade and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So the constrictions that we were working with was that our water starts about 20 feet higher than our point where we want to start spreading it. And so we had to come up with a path that was not too steep of a slope, but also worked with our infrastructure like the culvert to get it moving fast enough but not too fast to where it doesn't cause erosion, but it gets it ultimately to the spot where we want to start spreading it out.
Does anyone know what that water grass type stuff is?
Deer grass?
It's a juncus.
Oh, that one's a juncus.
I don't know which.
Okay.
There's deer grass and juncus here though.
That
So-
looks like an animal pen down there. Was that an animal pen?
That was a garden, I think. Is Terry here?
Yeah, it was a garden once upon a time.
So we stopped using it. It was only a garden in
So-
the drought.
So what would this swampy part indicate?
That's where
Water
your
wants to collect there.
that's your key point.
That's
for-
a key point, yeah. So this is a really good area to just kind of get that presentation. We can see that concave and then it's starting the convex. So it's actually the inflection point is just a bit down here.
Eric, can you make sure you use the mic? Thanks.
So we have on the landscape, you can see they go from concave down to convex. We got our inflection point, and just below is where all that water starts settling. And eventually, it actually, with heavy rain events, it shoots through that meadow and goes through. You can see straight through a ravine here. So we're actually above the key point. But because of our property and our design limitations and the amount of square feet we could distribute on this one hydraulic network, this was the best choice for our options. So you don't have to be perfect about it, but you can make it work. And finding that longest line is probably the best start.
Oh, wow, that's important. You want to find where your line is the longest so you can keep the water in that swale or whatever it is.
Yeah, for swales, because then you're extending the surface area of water and you're spreading it as far as possible on your property.
So are you using the contour lines then and finding the longest line on the contour?
Yeah, we actually redid this line. When we initially thought it would actually be down here a little more, we tried that and it didn't quite work out, and we tried it in another direction. It actually went way up here, and we've settled with this section, and it is working out for us. So.
And it didn't work out because why?
We ran into big trees.
Trees.
Well, it worked out fine here, but then all the way down there, it was like square in the middle of a tree, so we had to make adjustments.
And, yeah, and we made a decision whether we wanted to keep this path because it would have crossed. And I think, and we'll see a little later.
How many?
This edge right there.
I think horrible spot. There's all this loose soil. There's trees that have burned and are thick, and so on. So we want to mitigate those. We're going to be putting seeds and mulching and just trying to keep this, because when we do this, we're disrupting this. We're disrupting it, and it can invite weeds and pests.
Invasive plants.
Yeah. So like we want to get that back to the rest of the landscape. This is just temporary. It's a bit of a surgery, I would say. But once we get it healed and back, it'll be perfect and beautiful. So
it looks like this is an older roadway on the property.
Yeah, it was like an ATV trail.
You have a question?
Oh, how many swales should you put in, or do you want to put in? Like for, I don't know. How do you determine how many swales?
At least one.
At least one.
Earthworks are best done through patience and observation and seeing just how, if you're reaching limits in the work you do. So if this swale starts flooding and we're getting what I haven't brought, I'm bringing in a new term called overflow, where basically the water reaches here and then flows over our systems, then we have to think about how to keep that from eroding this and compromising the whole thing. So we'll have spillovers designed to take that overflow and push it down into another water system. So if this system becomes saturated, over time it'll take less and less time to fill up. So maybe with one rain event, if it's fully saturated, it'll fill up entirely. Right, Samba? It's like, let me check. So we have to consider new systems. Also, we want to maintain a lot of hydrology across the whole board. So maybe we do have drier earthworks that we may just try to get some of that infiltration in, divert some of that runoff, just so that we have a uniform texture for where we need water saturation for where we need.
So to say it differently, you may start with one swale. So find your longest line in your property where you can put a swale and have it work around the rest of your landscape. And then observe, engage, and see how much it fills up. And if you notice that it's really filling up and overflowing, then you can consider having a point where it spills into another swale and network. So it can evolve and adapt.
Couldn't you just put a swale above it to catch the water so it didn't?
That's another option too.
Could you have at that spot where it's level, was it called the checkpoint? Right there, where it went from a ditch to a swale, right there at the turn. What was that called? The checkpoint? No?
Yeah.
More or less.
Okay. Could you have engineered a swale since this is level, going that way, wrapping around.
Well, we
Split
could,
the water.
Yeah.
but if you read the landscape, you'll see that it actually falls off right there.
Yeah.
So if we tried to bring a swale that direction,
Right.
it'll actually end up just curving kind of below
Yeah.
the line that we're at now,
Right.
and then wrap around underneath the road, and then come back this direction all the way.
Right.
So, but that could have been an option depending on what we have over there.
Yeah.
If the road weren't in the way.
So you can
So-
definitely
Yeah,
ditch your water to a swale and then go two directions.
yeah. So
Most
also,
definitely.
Okay.
you could see the slope coming down,
Yeah.
and on that hillside is a road, and runoff comes from that point and flows down. We actually have another diversion point we didn't show you that's going through those blackberries more or less. So in the future, we can divert that and create a swale system
Right.
to connect on this hillside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we can get both flanked, like I was talking about in the presentation,
Right.
that'll really help with maintaining that water.
So on your swell, you're anticipating it to eventually reach an overflow point so you can spread the water elsewhere. So,
And one other thing, just behind us is what's called a seep. So water is oversaturated and it's leaking out of the ground. We put this swale close to it because we're hoping with specific plants, like plants that love water, like willows, button willow, mule fat, etc. We can draw that water out and create this hydraulic action and produce a flow. It's possible this seep will turn into a spring if we work on it and we're studying and we're observing nature and respecting it.
I don't get that. Where's the seep and what's causing it?
It's hiding here.
Oh,
And
It just seeps out of the ground right there.
It's
So it's
basically-
kind of a spring.
the groundwater just kind of, there's so much saturation, it just leaches out. It can't go anywhere, so it's coming out. Artesian spring, yeah.
Yeah, this area is wet year
And you
round.
can
pretty
tell
much,
that
right?
because of the vegetation that's there? Is that?
We've seen some evidence with this. We haven't seen it as much this year, but those last 2 years, it would just literally just be, you'd see all these wet spots and a lot of moss, a lot of plants around these really saturated zones.
And this area stays green year round, regardless if the rest of the meadow dries out. This area is very green.
So it seems like a theme that I'm hearing as far as like responding to how many swales to do is each property is very different, right? So you're thinking about what do you have existing, what's the vision and where do you want the water, observing where the water goes. So it seems like every place that you are is going to be its own tailored recipe to serving your needs and the existing, landscapes. I think that
Most definitely.
feels like it's what's been your response to a lot of things is watching, listening, and seeing what you want to.
Yeah, there's a term in permaculture called the map is not the territory. So you can look at a map and think about all these great designs, but the territory is going to tell you the best way it works. It's going to tell you how it works with water. This design may not work, but we're doing it, and we've seen success from previous designs that are very similar, so we have some confidence in that. But the territory is eventually going to tell us that. Maybe we'll get such a saturation point, we'll make a spring here, or maybe we'll bring it out that way. We have to observe and be patient and work with nature in that respect.
And making a decision on what's your body power, what tools
Yes.
do you have, what's the soil
Yes.
type. So all of that's going to determine
Like-
maybe do you do 7 stacks of swales or you do 1 because that's what you have the capacity for, and then you build from there versus design.
And in our climate, if your means are limited, the priorities are basically getting that fuel down, letting it rot. If you gotta export it because you can't get it to rot, that's what's gotta happen. But once you get the materials down to reduce that present risk, and as you can see, we're still working on that a bit, then you can start adding your water to help restore and regenerate.
The other side. The only reason why I like to use brush in that faculty is actually to cover the straw. So we'll cover it in straw and we'll seed it, and so we'll let the plants actually anchor the soil in. But the winds get so insane because Jarlow Gap is right there, and it just blows this direction like crazy, and it has a tendency to blow the straw off. So we may use a lot of this brush to cover the straw to keep it intact for sort
But I
of
can see that
windy
this
season.
will erode over time too, unless there's something to slow that process down as well.
Well, the plants are what are going to slow that down. So once this is covered and it has plant life growing on it, like the swale that I showed you on the walk at the top of the hill, the one on the left, and now in 9 months, or actually I guess it's in almost a year now. Polished, and they're holding all the soil intact. It's holding the soil intact. But again, this isn't moving water that's happening here either. This is water that just it'll get up to that level there, so it'll come up to about here. So obviously you can see we have low points, and it's going to need to be reinforced in this area specifically.
So how are you going to seed? What do you seed it?
Native seed that we collect. Certain areas we may do cover crop, but we have to commit to controlling it and cutting it down and not letting it go to seed. So that's why we really want to stick with natives. So this year I wasn't as good about it, but last year I collected a lot of native seed from the property because there's just so much here. It's
So
prolific.
this is disturbed soil, so looking at patterns in nature where the plants first start to seed and grow in that material, things like grasses and soft little herbs come in first. So in one, they have a good shallow root system. The herbs have a tap root, which helps draw that water up. So if we mix it with grasses and small herbs, and also put some trees to help, and they'll help support the trees. So over time, this will be totally anchored and part of the rest of the system.
So we will plant trees on the back end of the swale too. They'll be spaced. And
Fire came through in the 08 fire and burned all those oaks that came back. This last fire, they made it so it was better and more.
Yeah, this is, Daryl's been pointing out that there's a lot of wetland or riparian type of trees, and we're pretty high up, and we're seeing them on this landscape. So there's already that water table that's high up. For some reason we don't understand quite yet, but we can use that to our advantage and help heal this landscape too. Yeah, it's amazing.
all right. So do you guys want to walk the line that we're going to dig? We'll walk the rest of it.
Walk the line.
Make our way back to camp because I think it's getting close to lunchtime. A little bit past possibly. So this is the same contour line that we've been following all the way down from that point, and it's just going to continue on. The A-frame. Everyone's excited about the A-frame. We're moving. This is kind of what we anticipated we may dig today. That's why we flagged out this much. But we're going to do, in the workshop, we're going to be doing, we're going to break up into groups where some folks will be able to learn how to use the laser level and the A-frame. Some folks will be working on brush clearing, and some folks will be digging. And then we can all swap so everybody can take part in what they want to. So we've already cleared all of this brush last week. A lot of amazing people came out and helped us clear brush. And so this area is already lined up. We're actually going to be pulling these flags in this small section to let people practice with the laser level so they can learn how to use it and get comfortable with it in case you want to check it out and do projects on your land. And then this is where the brush clearing is going to begin because we haven't done this area yet.
Can you say the bakery?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's right on that line, I think.
I know, it's the closest one to the house.
So we've already marked out the line with these bamboo stakes, and we marked them about every 30 to 40 feet. So we'll be practicing also with the laser. Once this is cleared, we'll be able to get the laser level in here and actually do the small increments to get our contour line. And you can see the orange flag going all the way this way. If we made it this far, I'd be really excited, but I don't anticipate that.
We have to be careful too. This is
totally crunched out dead oak tree. If anybody hears like that, just run really fast.
If you're in a cracking, look up and then choose which direction you're going to run.
On top of the tree itself.
So this is quite thick in here, so we're not going to be walking through that direction. We have to clear all that brush.
Right.
Good thing we signed that liability.
I mean, if the branch is big enough, well then, you know.
Keep walking, keep walking. Let me know when you guys want to end here.
Cast your pitchfork there. Or however you want.
That would be a beautiful name. And if people eat lunch, you can maybe kind of take them to the research stuff. Like
Hey, here's another bay right here, Terry. Yeah, even closer. Just drop it down and run it back to the other part.
do we want to do like a little closeout, or is that?
Yeah, I'm wondering. Do you want to close out the live stream?
What do you have in mind? Oh, like, thank you.
Up to you.
Thanks for everyone who decided to join us on this tour. This is Concow Meadows Research Station and Campfire Restoration Project. You can find us at concowmeadows.org and of course cfrp.org. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your day, and please come up and see us.